Alright everybody, welcome to today's video. As you can see, the suspension is just about all back together on the Challenger except for the torsion bar, which is laying right here. And the reason for that is I discovered late in the day after I got to this point that unfortunately I hadn't turned my microphone on and none of the audio from today's video recorded. And so that was definitely a huge blow, and trying to figure out what I was going to do to rectify the situation. Do I tear the car back apart, which that definitely wasn't going to happen? Do I go ahead and redo the video from the passenger side? Well, the problem is it's a lot tighter on that side because I've got the wall over there, and so getting a camera and stuff over there was definitely not a very viable solution. So instead what we're going to do is try and go ahead and give you the commentary here now, and it's going to be of course a little bit different than from the actual videos that I recorded throughout the day, but at the same time we're going to go ahead and cover everything that we went throughout the process of getting everything back to this point, and then we'll button things up with the torsion bar installation, and that should have the proper audio. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we want to do is go and install the sway bar on the front, and that way we can do that now because all of the suspension stuff was out of the car, and it gives the most room to work with. And having a much larger diameter sway bar, the 1 1/4 inch versus the factory 7/8, we definitely want to have as much room as possible to go ahead and get it installed. So I did discover on my car, because my dad and I had welded in a bracket to restrain the engine from moving years ago, that it interfered with the new sway bar brackets. So I went ahead, cut that out, and got that all cleaned up so that way I could go ahead and mount the sway bar. So the sway bar brackets themselves are held in with 2 bolts, go in the factory locations. It's easy to bolt in, and you don't have to worry about making any modifications to install the brackets from Firm Field for their sway bars. Alright, so after we went ahead and got the brackets mounted for the sway bar, we went ahead and routed the sway bar through the K-member, which was a bit of a challenge to do because it is so much larger in diameter with the 1 1/4 inch versus the 7/8 from the factory front sway bar, but got it wrangled in there into place. And then next was to go ahead and attach the sway bar to the mounting brackets with the mounting tabs and the poly bushings. So I went ahead and used poly bushing lube, got those lubed up nice and slick, put those on, and then of course went ahead and made sure that I oriented the Zerk fittings to match the hole in the poly bushing, so that way I can do further lubrication of the sway bar in the future. And then of course we're going to go ahead and left the sway bar oriented downward, so that way we can go ahead and leave it disconnected until we get the passenger side suspension all buttoned up, so that way it's just not in the way. And then from there, the next task to put together was the lower control arm and the adjustable strut rods. Now the adjustable strut rods, they had clear instructions from QA1, but they did not go in that easy to get to the point where there was no binding. I struggled with it for quite a while today, went online, researched, read on the forums, see what people were doing, and I got it as best as I could. But this is another example of why I'm not a big fan of Heim joints, because we were reaching the limits of travel that the Heim joint could rotate with the suspension travel. And so I'm not totally sold on this design. They work. It seems to travel without binding almost all of the range of motion for the suspension. We'll see how it actually works in the real world application once I get everything buttoned up. But for now, it's in there. It seems to be working. Getting the adjustment right was not that easy. I mean, following the instructions is crystal clear how you go ahead and operate for getting the adjustable strut rod adjusted. but the final results just didn't give me the amount of travel that I was expecting. So if I'm not happy with this long term, I'll go ahead, as much as I hate to pull the suspension apart, I'll go ahead, pull it apart and replace it with the adjustable strut rods from Firm Feel, because those, even though they don't have the Heim joint on the K-member end, which gives you the biggest free motion, it does go through and have poly bushings, and it gives you a lot more range of motion than you can, even if it doesn't move as freely as the Heim joint does. So once we got that squared away though, then it was time to get the lower control arm buttoned up pretty close as well. We don't torque down the pivot nut for the lower control arm until the car is back on under its own weight and at ride height. The reason for that is we don't want any binding in the bushing for the lower control arm. All right, and once I buttoned up with the adjustable strut rod and the lower control arm, I went ahead and focused my attention here on the upper control arm and getting it installed. Now, I also went ahead and ordered brand new camber adjustment bolts from QA1 for this installation. The original ones were fine, but since all this other stuff was brand new, there was no sense in reusing the old hardware. So went ahead, got brand new camber adjustment bolts as well, and then since these have the poly bushings on them, make installation easier, went ahead and put the poly bushing lubricant on the ends. That way it helps slide it in. Once we got slid in, put the camber adjusting bolts in, snug them up. Again, we're gonna have to go and have the alignment done. I'll end up doing a rough alignment here in a future video with stuff here at home, and I'll show you guys how to do that. But that'll get us close enough. For now, we got it so that way it's all assembled and ready to go. After we went ahead and got the upper control arm squared away, then it was time to get the spindle and brake assembly back taken care of. And so I went ahead, put the new spindle on, went ahead, attached the new lower ball joint to the spindle, got everything buttoned up, torqued to spec per the factory service manual's requirements, got everything tightened up and ready to go, put new cotter pins in, everything's all tightened up. All right, so the next thing on the docket after we got the spindle and everything buttoned up was to go ahead and put the new tie rods and seamless adjusting sleeve in place. Now, before I went ahead and installed it, I went and compared its length to the one that I removed, the factory unit, so that way at least the toe setting is somewhat close to what it should be. So I went ahead, got the lengths the same, and then went ahead and installed that and torqued it down to spec as well per the service manual, and went ahead and put new cotter pins in. And that brings us up to date with where we're at now. Unfortunately, this video has not gone the way I expected it to today, but we're gonna make the best of it and give you the best possible video that we can. So the next thing we have to do, of course, is get the torsion bar installed. We've got the sway away torsion bar here, and according to the instructions, it doesn't matter which end goes in first. All that matters is that you use the left for the left side and the right for the right side. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And what we have to do per the instructions as well is put grease in both the ends of this torsion bar, as well as the torsion bar cross member cavity and the cavity on the lower control arm. So we'll go ahead, get all that buttoned up, and call it a day. right, so now we've got the torsion bar all hooked up and everything all buttoned up here. The last thing that has to be done is reconnect the shock to the lower control arm. So it's the single bolt, put it back in there, get it all buttoned up, and you're ready to go. I've already gone ahead and done it on here off camera, just because with brakes and everything back on here, you can't really get in here to see. So that's everything you need to do at this point. The next thing you do is put the front wheel back on the car and put it down on under its own weight, and at that point go ahead and tighten up that lower control arm pivot nut, and it torques to I think like 145 foot-pounds is what the QA1 instructions say. And at that point just go ahead and get an alignment done and drive the car. All right, so this is actually the third ending to this video that I filmed in as many of days. And the reason for that has to do with the torsion bar installation. Now, when I first installed the torsion bar, as you saw in this video, the car was sitting really low in my perspective. And so I reached out to Peter Bergman, and during our conversations back and forth, I went ahead, pulled the torsion bar back out, reclocked it 1/6 of a rotation, and that clearly didn't solve my problem, because then the car was sitting so high in the front that I actually couldn't reconnect the shock to the lower control arm because it was just sitting so high. So of course that clearly wasn't right, so I put it back to the way it was the first time I installed it, and just cranked on the torsion bar adjusting bolt even more to get the car back to where it was sitting at the right height before I went ahead and replaced all the components. And then after I did that, I sent the finalized pictures to Peter Bergman and got his input on whether or not I had any issues. He said everything looked fine, and so we're gonna go ahead, after I get the rest of the suspension buttoned up on the passenger side and the rear suspension and the steering box done, take the car out for a spin and see how it does. So it just seemed a little extreme to me on how tight I had to tighten up the torsion bar adjusting bolt, but at the same time, these torsion bars are aftermarket, they're larger diameter, and they've reclocked the ends to accommodate for that larger spring rate, so I just wasn't expecting as drastic of a change as I actually got. So there probably isn't anything wrong with what I've got in the setup here, and so it's just something to keep in mind if you go and replace these torsion bars, is you are gonna need to go ahead to get a little higher elevation in the front of your car. You're gonna have to really torque down on those adjusting bolts and get the car sitting where you want it. Now, if you want the car sitting lower, then obviously it's not gonna be a big deal. You're gonna have less of an adjustment done on that torsion bar adjusting bolt. So that's overall how this thing goes back together. I mean, it's a pretty simple and straightforward process. It took a few hours, went ahead, pulled everything apart, all the stock bolts and locations, mounting points, all in the same for the new parts. And so it's just spending a day or two going through and replacing all of those components. We'll see, like I mentioned earlier in the video, how well this QA1 strut rods work. Considering the low range of motion that we're gonna be seeing on this, they should be fine. I just, of course, am paranoid and prefer to have as maximum amount of travel as possible. So we'll see how they work. And then of course, if I end up changing them out in the future video, I will let you know in a video as well. So that way you can see how things are going for the long term on this project. But in a nutshell, that's how we go ahead and put everything back together. I hope you found this information useful and educational as always. If you did, go ahead, smash that like button, give me that thumbs up. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, and it also helps tell me what types of videos you like and don't like. And of course, if you want to be kept up to date with all my future uploads, including continuation on this project as well as the others, don't forget to smash that subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell as well. And on that note, guys, I will see you in the next video.